Hey, so time for a Daily News Roundtable, and we're talking about students, which is great because you were a teacher at one point. You love this topic. They have a lot of choice these days.
Yes.
Including which race
to choose.
Yes.
If you are in Delaware, this happens to be the case. So right now, a proposed education regulation, and specifically Regulation 225, is being debated in Delaware. So children would be given the option, or students would be given the option, to self-identify not only on the gender spectrum, but also in the racial spectrum. So this is all to protect, these are protected student rights. In other words, things as we are very well aware of when you speak of transgender students, what bathrooms they should be allowed to use, what teams they should be allowed to play for, etc. But now this is an interesting discussion about race because this proposal would allow students to also self-identify as whatever race they feel they are. So that's a really interesting discussion, which brings up one person's name in particular for me, and that is Rachel Dolezal.
Absolutely.
In fact, her name today is Ngechi Amare Diallo, which is a Nigerian name, but we, the world, know her still as Rachel Dolezal. She was famously, in 2015, the Caucasian woman who passed pretty successfully for a long time as a black woman. She became a civil rights activist, and she says, I am transracial. She compared her experience to Caitlyn Jenner, who was also transitioning at around the same time as her story broke. Now this discussion is there such a word as transracial as students in Delaware will be able to choose? ...
What I'm a little confused at is to why this needs to be validated by the school. Like, how does this play into sort of the academic format of the school? If you identify a certain way, that's your choice to identify a certain way. I mean, I can see the implications when you're talking about transgender because that has direct implications for the school environment, meaning, you know, as you mentioned, sports teams and which bathrooms to use and that type of thing. But in terms of race, I'm just trying to figure out how that translates.
How that applies.
Yes.
Again, if you look at the Rachel Dolezal case, she would say that she always felt, because she identified as a black woman, so she then felt that the discrimination towards African Americans was also her discrimination.
Right.
So if then this happens, it plays out in a school situation. No one knows because it hasn't been tested what that actually means.
I have a completely different lens on this, and that is, you know, I don't often identify as biracial, but I have a Scottish mom and I have a Sri Lankan dad, and I would get this question on school forums all the time. Which one are you? And I wouldn't know which one to put down, and you're not allowed to leave it blank. So I would be curious to see, and I would like to be able to see, at least in this country anyway, where you have the option of picking more than one, because there's a lot of Canadians who have more than one race.
Which, I mean, if you talk about, for example, President Barack Obama, and he too as biracial, but the world sees him and he also identifies as an African-American man.
So
is that what you mean?
I had this discussion with my mom who said, I usually just put down white, but she says, well, that's interesting. And I said, well, because that's, I don't know, that to me seemed didn't seem like the other options fit me.
Right.
So we've been having this discussion for a long time.
Interesting, yeah.
I've chosen the other box as well because my father's Portuguese Brazilian, my mother's
and that's
Filipino.
not listed.
And it's not listed. So luckily, there are more boxes available now that say other. And then I fill in the other because we don't fit into any boxes. Yeah. So
can't box us in, Mel.
You can't, guys. You can't. Fascinating discussion.
It is.